and welcome back to another episode of Fashion Meets History with Domii Davis. Before we get into the episode, make sure you like, follow, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. And as always, feel free to follow me on my other social media channels below. The link to my website is also in the description box below, as well as all of the other videos. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. Picking up where we left off in the 80s with Tina and Patty in part 2 of Black Music that Changed Fashion and History. Next up, we have Whitney Houston and Janet Jackson. Janet, of course, hails from the illustrious Jackson family, toting Motown acts like the Jackson 5, and of course, Michael Jackson himself. As the baby Jackson, Janet initially received acclaim in TV, getting her start as Penny on the 70s sitcom Good Time. Like the other 8 out of 10 of the Jackson siblings, Janet was also musically and vocally gifted. In '82, she dropped her first self-titled studio album. But the success that we would think of Janet having today didn't come until 1986 when she released her third album, Control. And of course, not so coincidentally, this is also when Janet's iconic fashion and style starts to take flight and get notice and recognition. The Control album alone had 5 hit singles that all charted on the Billboard Hot 100. Since its conception in 1986, the album has been certified platinum 5 times. It sold more than 500 million copies, and it won her a Grammy nomination. In Janet's previous albums in the early 80s, she maintained kind of the modern 70s style and the same aesthetic that she had playing in Good Time. Her Control style changed the game. The cover donned an all-black monochromatic look featuring a black turtleneck, classic for the 80s, tall asymmetrical hair, and geometric hoops. Like the Supremes in part 1 of episode 8, a lot of these style influences can be attributed to Black culture and the Black community. Janet made it her own and gave the culture and the style a larger platform. Her 4th project, Rhythm Nation, dropped in 1989 and skyrocketed her even further on the music and the fashion charts. Janet's Rhythm Nation fit is iconic because it pays homage to classic 80s styles, and its militaristic vibe nods to other Black influences like the Black Panthers. The military style jacket, paired with classic 80s attire like the baseball cap, buttons, brooches, and adornments similar to rap and hip hop chains, shoulder pads, collar, and of course the black leather boots, make the style worthwhile and memorable to all of us. Simultaneously, Whitney Houston was also beginning to make waves in music and in fashion. In 1985, Whitney released her first self-titled album, which held legendary titles like You Give Good Love and Saving All My Love for You. Unlike Janet, who had an upbringing in the entertainment industry, Whitney's upbringing came from the church, although she did have influences through family relations and connections that kept her close to the entertainment industry. Her style, musically and fashion-wise, changed to a more secular look and feel. Like Janet, Whitney also donned monochromatic looks with leather and layers. Whitney heavily influenced styles of the era like ruffles, shoulder pads, sequins, a nod to Diana Ross, oversized and structured blazers, and fitted and light wash denim. Whitney's first album went certified diamond and produced 4 Grammy nominations, winning her 1 for Best Vocalist Performance. Her second album, simply titled Whitney, was released in 1987. Classic hits from this album include I Wanna Dance with Somebody and Where Do Broken Hearts Go? Throughout the 80s, Janet and Whitney both continued to make a name for themselves musically and stylistically. And now we're entering the 90s. In this era, we see the emergence of Janet's we see a lot more of the emergence of Janet's personal style and attributes to the culture that we think of in 2023, like the Poetic Justice braids from her movie with Tupac, Poetic Justice. The braids, now named for the movie, Poetic Justice braids, along with the newsboy hat, the crunchy denim waist, and the oversized chunky belt, were the makeup of this iconic look. In '93, we get Janet's 5th album, Janet, which has a few of my favorite songs like Anytime, Any Place, You Want This, and That's the Way Love Goes. The successful '93 album was followed in '97 with Velvet Rope, which has my absolute favorite Janet song, I Get Lonely. Now, the thing about the Velvet Rope album is that this is when we see Janet really come about. In 95, we saw her and Michael with Scream, and we saw a different, edgier look. Velvet Rope took it to a new level. Channeling some Tina Turner vibes, Janet went from the look of a soulful R&B artist to more of the punk rock look that actually laid the foundation for the early 2000s era. Most iconically, we see the emergence of the burnt orange hair. The curls were absolutely popping. It's by far one of my all-time favorite looks on Janet. Throughout the Velvet Rope era, we see more punk styles like the cropped, cuffed, double-breasted blazers, more leather, wide leg, baggy, and cargo pants. More of a distance from monochromatic to looks to layering different colors and patterns. And of course, chunky boots, which have made their way back around in 2023. While Janet was leaning punk, Whitney was leaning more modern, clean 90s. Whitney continued to follow a lot of monochromatic looks and color schemes. She also veered more into blue jeans, button downs, blazers, and Converse. But Whitney also gave us a lot of long gowns and dresses that accentuated the silhouette and made it flow. She also pushed small variations of leather, print, and velvet, mixing different patterns and fabrics. Whitney gave us 4 albums in the 90s, including 2 soundtracks for A Preacher's Wife and The Bodyguard, and of course, honorable mention, Waiting to Exhale. Her 4th studio album, My Love Is Your Love, released in the late 90s. As the decades progressed and we get into the early 2000s, the 2010s, and eventually present day, both Whitney and Janet have continued to make waves in music and in fashion. But of course, like many artists, both decided to take more of a dip back from the public space, focusing on their personal lives. Of course, Janet had the tragic loss of her brother Michael Jackson, and Whitney herself tragically lost her life in 2012 after what was said to be a triumphant comeback due to her addiction, and of course overcoming her tumultuous relationship with Bobby Brown. Janet leaned back into her roots a little bit and went into acting, performing in movies like Tyler Perry's Why Did I Get Married. She also dabbled in a few public relationships, like her one with Jermaine Dupri, which actually lasted quite a long time. And then she eventually found motherhood late in life, which is kind of where she's been at, and we love to see her in this phase of her life. Now, because this is a channel that is dedicated to fashion, of course, and we're talking about Janet, like we have the nip slip incident from the Super Bowl. So, first things first, this era is highlighting the 80s and going into the 90s. The incident happened in the 2000s, of course, because Justin Timberlake was a part of the performance. What I will say is that her outfit, nevertheless, was iconic. And there you have it. That has been part 3 of Black music that changed fashion and history. Next week, we will be wrapping up our final episode in the 90s with Missy Elliott and Aaliyah. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Fashion Meets History with Domii Davis. Before we get out of here, make sure you like, follow, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And don't forget to hit the notification button so you don't miss any new videos. And as always, feel free to follow me on my social media channels below. And I'll see you guys next week.